This is outrageous. Sian Berry.
The question was, how do we stop people feeling scared of more attacks coming? And when you see things like what happened in Manchester, when you hear about what happened in Westminster, all of us travelling on the tube every day, it is really hard not to feel scared. We need to make sure people feel reassured that everything is being done. And what I think is that the police need more resources, but it's really important where those resources go. Police have been warning about cutbacks to community policing. They say specifically that the best intelligence comes from communities, not from things like blanket surveillance, but from police firmly rooted in communities who can be called upon when people seem to be starting to go wrong. And the prevent strategy doesn't currently do
let's bring
that.
Kazim back,
doesn't
you
give
asked
resources to the police.
Okay, Kazim, you asked the question. Do you find any of this convincing?
I would just like to talk about police numbers for a second. I mean, I'm no expert on this. It's not my field of work. But the two police constables or commissioners came out after the wake of the Manchester attack and said that this was not responsible due to a lack of resources. So I think it's incorrect to push a political message over the misery of other people. I don't think that's correct.
There are 32,000 police officers in London, and down from a high in 2010 of about 33,000.
But the numbers doing community policing, they have dropped. We've seen cutbacks from where we used to have 3 officers and 3 PCSOs in every single council ward. Up until recently, the mayor's now doubled it, but we only had 1. And I'm a local councillor, and I know the lack of contact there was. The police officer that we had was changing every 6 months. So there wasn't
can you answer this?
With the community.
How do you stop a Russian buying a flat in London and he's not going to actually live in it?
Well, first of all, you have to work with developers to stop them. Some developers advertise these places overseas and have sold them all off plan. They need to offer them to people in London first.
Right. Sian Berry, what do you think?
This idea of selling off-plan to foreign investors, that's part of the economics of how big developers work now at the moment. All developments in London are doing, and I'll tell you what, far too many developments that used to be council estates are doing this too. Councils in London have knocked down 8,000 council homes in recent years, and they've not rebuilt them. We need to be doing more to relax the borrowing rules on councils. We need to put more grants in place so that councils and housing associations have a different economic model. They're not putting lots and lots of private flats into all of their developments, but they can focus on social rented flats and on living room flats.
Why not
and just to say,
free up space by building on the Greenbelt? Why not do it?
There is plenty of space in central London at the moment.
Is there?
There is lots of brownfield land. There is lots of infill land that we can use.
Brownfield land's got hospitals on a lot of it.
The very last thing we should do is touch the Greenbelt. But can I talk about rents for a second? Because actually, for the homes we already have, if we built hundreds and thousands of new homes that people could afford, that would barely dent. There's 2.3 million private renters. I'm one of them in London. Until recently, I really struggled to pay my rent as well. And the only thing that's really going to help the existing people in London to pay their rent and save up for a deposit is the power to do rent controls. And the mayor needs that power. The government's not allowing him to have that power. I'm not even sure that Sadiq Khan's tried that hard to get it, but it's absolutely vital.
Let me. Your question on Brexit, Troy.
Yeah, 60% of Londoners voted to remain in the European Union, including myself, and many of us feel forgotten about. So what would your party do to ensure that London's interests are being considered in the upcoming Brexit negotiations?
Those EU nationals are working in our hospitals, they are working in social care.
Anyone in this room in that position?
They're working in financial services.
Okay,
And some of
maybe
them
not.
have British partners and British children. So that's the first thing we would do.
Would you do that, Sian Berry?
Absolutely. I mean, I think
You'd guarantee their place?
Absolutely.
And lose the bargaining chip?
I'm ashamed that we haven't got further in nearly a year in terms of negotiations. I mean, Vince is right to list all those things that we might lose. The negotiations are going to be really, really intricate. And yet every time you raise, well, OK, what are we going to do about EU nationals? What are we going to do about science funding? You say that to somebody who's leave, and all they do is shout back the slogans at you as if you're having a debate again. But actually, we need to be talking much more about the details. I'll tell you who I want negotiating Brexit. I want Caroline Lucas negotiating Brexit. She was an MEP for 10 years. She hasn't got a massive chip on her shoulder, and she can just go out there and actually try and get the best deal for us in Europe. But once we do know what that deal is, I think we need to have a second referendum. Not the same question, a ratification referendum, once we know what the deal is, because it's true.
Who's
we
Brexit
didn't know
here?
what we were voting
Thank you,
for.
Sian.
Exactly.
Who's Sian Berry?
The Conservatives have made a right mess of this. I mean, I think it is completely wrong to try and take away your home to pay for your care. This is social security. It's one of those things that should be paid for out of things like national insurance. Like what we do is not reduce national insurance for the better paid. It currently drops at a certain level to a very low level. We think people should carry on paying national insurance and then it should go towards social care. And when it comes to inheritance, we think the money that comes from inheritance should be taxed according to the income of who receives it, not according to the estate that's giving it. I think that would be much, much more fair when you've got people who maybe have, like, just that's their home is their only asset. Their children are poor, their children cannot afford other homes. If those children are not wealthy, they should be not be taxed on that inheritance.